Welcome to the Mindset RX podcast. My name is Tom Foxley and I help functional athletes gain a champ's mindset. Today's episode is story time. And it's story time in a few different ways, because we'll start off with a story. We'll talk about the stories that you tell yourself, and eventually, if I've got time, because I need to get to jiu-jitsu at some point today, I'll go through how to release yourself from those stories too. Let us start off with a few different stories you may be telling yourself. The first one comes about as, let's say, a result of going off the rails and eating crap at the weekend and not really being the athlete you want to be, and kind of nailing it for 5 days of the week, and then as of Friday night till Sunday night, we're kind of taking a hiatus from who you really want to be and that rhythm. So quite often the story that we get from that ends up with something along the lines of like, I don't have enough self-control. I can't be consistent. I'm not a consistent person. I'm that kind of person who I can't keep my shit together. Something like that. And then we have the story that comes about as a result of not pushing as hard enough as possible in WODs, or as hard as you can do. Someone described it as emptying the tank the other day. And if you're not emptying the tank on a consistent basis, you probably fill up with the mindset of, you know what? I'm weak-minded. I'm not strong enough. I'm not mentally strong enough to be an athlete, or I'm not mentally strong enough to push to where I want to be, and I'm essentially never going to get that. Or if you can't get where you want, if you find yourself spinning your wheels in training or in kind of wider life in general, maybe you pick up the story of, I'm always going to be unsuccessful because I have been unsuccessful so far. And when we experience this thing time and time again, when we kind of bring up this story, or when we bring up these kind of experiences, actually let's start there. When we experience these experiences time and time again, when we experience the experience of not being the type of person you want to be, eventually your brain decides, okay, this is the way the world is. And initially that was a really good idea. It's kind of our brain needs a certain grasp of reality, and it wants to understand as many rules about the world as it can. So in regards to training, it picks up all these stories of some beneficial stories as well, but like other stories of like, oh, this is the way the world is, and therefore I act in a certain way to stay safe and to belong in this environment. Like if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have physiological needs, and then we have the first kind of mental needs or mindset needs, as you can put it that way, of safety. I need to remain safe as an organism. I need to protect myself, and belonging. I need to belong in this environment. I need to not be kicked out, and I need to not be ostracized. I need to be comfortable and safe within this environment. So we have this kind of these kind of stories help us do this. Like the story of, for example, if I drop this barbell on my head, it's going to hurt, so I should probably get out of the way. That's a very good story to have when you go for that snatch and you miss it over your head, or your elbows don't lock out, you'll probably jump out of the way. Or if you let's use it's probably not a good idea to turn up to the gym and be a complete dick to everyone, because you'll be ostracized from the community. You won't belong in the community. Or if you're and I wondered whether I started this podcast out and thinking, am I going to say the story? And yeah, I'm going to say the story. Or like if you're me, and it's probably a very good idea to remember the story on a frequent basis that protein shakes really don't agree with me. And if I was going to try and sneak out a quiet fart when I'm coaching at CrossFit Aldgate, one time it may not go as you quite plan for it to go. So those are the stories that we have, and these stories are very, very helpful sometimes, and then other times they completely keep us stuck, because the stories we hold in our mind, or the stories our subconscious mind believes, completely dictate our actions, and we'll never act outside of those actions. We'll never be able to perform our behaviors if they don't correlate with our beliefs. So in essence, trying to change your actions without changing your beliefs is never going to happen. The reason why people progress is partially ability, but only because that ability now coincides with a new story they hold about themselves. So in reality, we can say the only reason people grow is because they change the stories about what's possible for themselves. So they may go to the gym knowing that they're the type of person who goes, like, let's use the consistency story. So imagine you're someone who has never trained at the gym before. You're like, I'm guessing if you're listening to this probably isn't you, but imagine you're someone who has never been to the gym before, gets scared off by it, and does the standard kind of 2 days in January and then falls off the wagon for the rest of the year, and then it gets to January again and then you go back. Maybe you're the type of person who believes that you can you can probably go just once. You can turn up to the gym and just go once. But what if, whilst you're there, someone says, or you basically realize that you're far more capable than you think you are, or you enjoy it somehow, or basically your belief about the environment changes, your belief about who you are changes whilst you're there. And that's something that would eventually lead to, in a hopeful scenario or a beneficial scenario, to performing the behavior you want on a more regular basis, enjoying it more, and slowly changing the belief of who you are, and therefore the actions change as a result. So when we're trying to, for example, nail our nutrition, what we have to do is change our beliefs first, because otherwise we're just relying on blind luck. Like the right influence comes into your life at a certain time and you rely on like complete blind luck to change your stories, or to remove yourself from your stories. Or what we or the kind of the more beneficial or the more structured or the more like reliable way of doing this is to actually work on your mindset and identify the stories that are holding you back. So there's 4 things, and I've spoke about this a bunch on podcasts, not only on my own podcast, but some podcasts I've been interviewed on too. I've spoken about this a bunch. And I've received, and basically there's 4 things that build into our stories, which are experiential influence. They're all different types of influence. Experiential influence, so what you experience in day-to-day life. Education, which is what you are explicitly told. Evolution, which is like kind of what you pick up genetically. And then finally, your environment too, so what you implicitly pick up. And these all create stories. These are all going to dictate exactly who you believe you are. And as I said, you'll never act outside of these beliefs, so you have to change your stories in order to change your outcome. What we then need to do is pick up the fact that our language is a huge signifier. Our actions are a huge signifier. Our physical symptoms like tightness or anxiety or lack of range of motion or kind of even shaking or excitement, like those kind of physical sensations, and also our emotional state, they are all indicators of our story. So what we need to do in order to change the stories is not trying to force a new story in, but become uniquely and intensely aware of the stories that fill our mind, the ones that pervade every thought, that pervade every action, and ultimately dictate who you are. Because we're never going to be able to change stories, to ram new stories in, but we can release ourselves from the hold that stories have on our mind. And these stories and beliefs, and I use the phrases interchangeably, once changed, will open you up to all kinds of possibilities in life and in training and in mindset and whatever area you want to look at it. So if you can release yourself from the belief that you are the type of person you are right now and that can't be changed, you will find yourself on top of podiums. You will find yourself achieving the things that you want to achieve in training. You'll find yourself in the best shape you've ever been, but only if you release yourself from the stories that you're telling yourself. This is the fundamental basis of mindset. We have to change the story or the belief system or the belief structure you hold in order to change the outcome. Just trying to change the outcome time again will not work, and it will never work unless you change the story alongside it. So if you enjoyed the show, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes. I've seen a bunch of these coming in on the UK. I've no idea how to see the US reviews, by the way. So if someone could let me know what those look like, I'd love that. So head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll hopefully speak to you very, very soon. Oh, and one more thing. If you want to get more intensely aware of your inner athlete and hear the inner athlete speaking to you in order to identify your stories, I've put together a complete training which is available on my free Facebook group, or the Mindset RX free Facebook group, which you can find through Facebook, but I'll include a link to this to the group on the show. And you'll apply, and then my favorite person in the world, because she saves my life on a regular basis, tomorrow will accept you in, and then we'll go from there. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll speak to you very soon.